Hey, it's Max. Welcome back to The Art of the Craft. Tonight we're going to be making a short rib ragu. I know what you're thinking. Typically, this would take all day cooking over the stove, but we're going to be using the pressure cooker and it reduces the time down to 30 minutes. Easy weeknight meal. Let's get cooking. As you see, I have some beautiful big short ribs here. I've got some really big ones. Make sure you get them with a lot of meat on the top. You could also use oxtail if you wanted, but what I've done is salt and peppered the outside, left in the refrigerator overnight, and now you have a lot of the water that has evaporated off and it's concentrating that beefy flavor. Let's talk about some of the liquids here. I got a great Italian red wine. This is going to be used to deglaze the pan and add a little bit of the depth to the ragu as we go on. We're also going to use two types of tomatoes. I've got a San Marzano whole tomato that I'll just crush up in my hand and add to it. And then we have some tomato paste. So we'll take tomato paste. One note is make sure that you kind of cook the tomato paste in the bottom of the pan before you start adding all the others. This will add a much more complex flavor, trust me. I've got some chicken broth here. Chicken broth I made myself, so it's pretty thick and viscous. You could also use beef broth. I tend to find chicken broth brightens up the dish a little bit more. Either one is perfectly acceptable. Maybe I'll do an episode on how I make my chicken and beef broths for you. The vegetable base is a mirepoix. Mirepoix is simply a French term. It's a combination of celery, carrot, and yellow onion. And what I've done is dice these up pretty small. One trick is I do like to keep a whole carrot and whole celery just here so that I can add them to the stew at the very beginning. As I pressure cook and at the end of that process, I'll take them out and then trade them in for the diced version. That way you get a lot of the flavor, but the diced vegetables don't end up disintegrating because they've cooked too long. So now I have some dried mushrooms that I've added to some water here. I'll mince these up and add them to the ragu as well. That'll give a much more umami flavor to the dish. You're gonna absolutely love it. And this is about 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. Mince this up and have this ready to go. When we cook with it, we're gonna throw in the onion first and then add the garlic to it. If you cook the garlic for too long, it'll get bitter. And then I've got a beautiful set of aromatics here. You can get whatever you have around. I have some rosemary, some oregano. I put a little bit of red chili flakes and bay leaf because I like a little bit of heat, and then some thyme. So add all of these to it. We'll kind of personalize your ragu, make it exactly what you're looking to find. And then I've got some Dijon mustard and some cream. And what we're gonna do is add these at the very end of the dish. It helps you adjust the flavor and balance out the dish. You don't wanna add it in the beginning because these aren't something that you wanna cook. All right, so what I'm doing now is I've got my pressure cooker super hot. It's on the sear function and we're gonna brown off the meat. I'm only gonna put 2 in at a time. I don't wanna overcrowd. A little bit of oil, and we're just gonna let it get hot, brown one side of the meat, and don't touch it, don't mess with anything. So a little bit of oil. And here's the short rib. Yeah, you can hear that, right? That's perfect, that's what we wanted. So make sure it's always hot before you put anything in. I'm gonna give it a good push, make sure there's good contact. Now don't mess with it, let it cook. It'll take about 5 or 6 minutes to get a really good color on one side. We're actually only looking for one side of browning. As we cook inside the pressure cooker, that'll take care of the rest of the meat, but we want to get that nice caramelization Maillard reaction on one side at least. It smells fantastic, and it's been crackling and popping, so it sounds fantastic. Let's take a look. It's been about 5 minutes and see what we've got here. So starting to brown and caramelize exactly what we want, but the meat is still rare, and that's gonna cook in the pressure cooker, so don't worry about that. This is exactly what we're looking for. And notice, if I don't mess with the meat, after about 5 minutes or so, it lifted off the bottom of the pan perfectly easy. The meat will tell you when it's ready. Now that the meat has been removed, we're gonna keep it on saute. What I've got is hot beef fat in the bottom. It's absolutely delicious, so we're not gonna let that go to waste. Let's go ahead and start on our vegetables. First thing we're gonna go ahead and put in is the onions. So we're gonna add 1 whole yellow onion. So I'm just giving the onions a good toss to coat. We're not looking to do it all the way through. As the pressure cooker cooks, it'll take care of the veggies for us. So we've been working about 3 minutes. The onions are starting to turn translucent. That's what we want. So go ahead and add your garlic in. Remember, we don't want this to burn, so we add it at the very end. And I know you're thinking, what about the carrots and celery? This is when we would need to add the giant carrot and celery to the mixture, not the diced version. This will allow us to get the flavor. We'll fish it out later, and then we'll put in the smaller versions for the very end. Now we want to make sure to add the tomato paste. And if you remember, I earlier said we want to cook the tomato paste before we add the extra liquids. So I've done this in the bottom of the pan with the dry vegetables. That's going to add an incredible depth of flavor, and it's really going to change the outcome of the dish. The tomato paste has gotten darker and more fragrant. That's exactly what we're looking for. The next step is to deglaze the mixture in here. And deglaze simply means add wine to a hot, dry pan, and it loosens up all of the delicious goodness that's stuck to the bottom of it. It's called fond, and that'll incorporate into the ragu and make it delicious. So let's do that. Simply put right in here. And move it around with your spoon to scrape all the bottom off. So it's been about a minute. The alcohol's cooked off of the wine, and as you can see, I'm adding whole tomatoes. I crush them through my fingers so that we have small bits. I don't want giant chunks of tomato in the ragu. All the tomatoes are cooking and bubbling and happy. This is a perfect time to taste for salt and pepper and see if you want to adjust anything. The next step is to add some chicken broth, so we'll add that to add a little bit more liquid and a little bit more body to the ragu. The base looks perfect. We're about ready to go. Next steps would be to add those mushrooms. So I've diced the mushrooms and kind of drained them of their excess liquid. This is when we're gonna add all of our herbs. So I've got the thyme and the rosemary and the chili flakes and the bay leaf. You can just dump them all in and we'll fish them out later. Now the next step is just to add the beef. So we're gonna take these chunks of beef and kind of nestle them in, move them around a little bit. Make sure that they're not sitting on top of the ragu. We wanna give them a little bit of coverage with all the sauce. All right, we're gonna go ahead and seal up the pressure cooker. We're looking for high pressure or 12.5 PSI on top of that. Seal it and let it cook for about 30 minutes. At 30 minutes, we'll fish out the big vegetables and any of the pieces of the herbs that we don't want. Put in the smaller ones and adjust for taste. 30 minutes later, and we're gonna go ahead and take a peek at what we've got so far. So when you open, exactly what I was expecting. This tomatoey, beefy fragrance. So the next step is to add all of the vegetables, and we're gonna cook it for about another 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, the second cook is done. So when we open this up, we see everything mixed together. It looks beautiful. The next step is we want to pull out the short ribs, any large pieces of stem, the bay leaf, those large celery and carrot. We're gonna go ahead and take them out. So this is the short rib beef. Now that it's been shredded, we'll add it back to the sauce. If your sauce is a little bit thin at this point, this is when you want to reduce it. Take 5 minutes or so and get some of that excess water out of it. The final step is to add a little bit of cream. It helps with the balance of the pasta. It balances out some of the acid and gives it a great mellow flavor. And then about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, which adds a different kind of zip. Give it a good stir, turn off the heat, and we're good to go. I promised you a double header, so we're gonna make some fresh pasta. I have here an automatic pasta maker. Is it authentic and the real deal that Nana would make? No, but it's 90% there. So let's go ahead and get this started. I have here 300 grams, and you're gonna wanna be exact with this, measured out of a combination of semolina and all-purpose flour. So we're gonna just put this in the hopper right here. So then we're gonna add all of the liquid mixture into it. So I've got a combination of eggs, water, and a little bit of olive oil. And what we'll do is just add it to the machine. It'll automatically distribute and then mix it for us. Now just sit back and relax while the machine takes care of all the mixing and proofing. It's got this all figured out. Listen for the machine to switch to extrusion mode and watch the noodles start to appear. You're gonna wanna grab a sharp knife and make sure to cut off the first inch or so. That part can be a little bit dry, so I usually set it aside and add it back to the dough later. From here, I let the noodles extrude about twice as long as my desired length. This gives me some extra to work with when shaping them. While those noodles are drying, let's go ahead and make it a hat trick and whip up a refreshing salad. I've got a nice piece of burrata cheese, some ripe tomatoes, fresh basil from the garden, and a clove of garlic. You're gonna wanna go ahead and core the tomatoes and cut them into large chunks, however you like them. Toss them in a mixing bowl with a little bit of salt. The tomatoes are gonna start releasing their juices. You'll wanna crush the garlic and mince it finely before adding it to the tomatoes. Drain the tomatoes to remove some of that excess liquid, but don't throw that out. It can be used in your pasta sauce that we're making or a vinaigrette. Finely chop the herbs and then toss them with the tomatoes. I have a beautiful head of red lettuce. I'm gonna go ahead and place that on the plate, and you'll wanna add a handful of the dressed tomatoes. Top it with a chunk of our burrata cheese, drizzle with a little extra virgin olive oil, a splash of balsamic vinegar, and a sprinkle of fresh cracked pepper. Bring a pot of salted water to a boil and add the fresh noodles. You're going to want to cook them for 2 to 3 minutes because they are fresh. Toss those noodles with a small amount of sauce before adding the remaining sauce to the top. And we're going to garnish it with some fresh cheese and herbs, and you're ready to go. I hope you enjoy. Catch you next time.